AITA for refusing to babysit my niece after my sister accused me of ruining her plans? I need to get this off my chest because it's caused a huge rift in my family, and I don't know if I'm completely in the wrong here. For some background, I'm a 29-year-old woman, and my sister, Lily, 34F, has a 5-year-old daughter named Ava. Lily and I have always been close, but in very different stages of life. She's been married for 6 years and has a hectic schedule as a real estate agent, while I'm single, work a 9 to 5 office job, and don't have kids. Growing up, Lily was always the golden child. She got straight A's, went to a prestigious college, and married a guy who's successful and charming. Meanwhile, I was the quieter one who struggled to find my place. Our parents adore Lily and Ava, and they're always telling me how I should help out more because Lily is so busy. I don't resent my sister, but it's exhausting hearing constant comparisons. Over the past 2 years, Lily has started relying on me to babysit Ava more and more. It began with the occasional Saturday evening when she had a work event or date night. I didn't mind at first because Ava is a sweet kid and I love spending time with her. But lately it's escalated. Lily has started assuming I'll always be available, often texting me last minute or dropping Ava off without properly asking. It's disrupted my plans more than once, and I've had to cancel outings with friends because of it. The breaking point came last month. Lily called me on a Wednesday afternoon and asked if I could babysit Ava on Saturday because she and her husband, Mark, had tickets to a concert. I already had plans to go hiking with friends and told her I couldn't. She sounded annoyed, but said she'd figure something out. Come Saturday morning, I was getting ready to leave for my hike when Lily showed up at my door with Ava. She claimed their original sitter canceled and that I had to watch Ava because there was no one else. I stood my ground and said no, reminding her that I had told her I wasn't available. She started pleading, saying it was just for a few hours and that I was being selfish. When I still refused, she blew up, yelling that I was prioritizing some stupid hike over family. Ava started crying because she didn't understand what was going on, and Lily stormed off with her, muttering about how unreliable I was. Later that day, I got a string of angry texts from Lily. She accused me of being a bad aunt, said I'd ruined their evening, and claimed I didn't understand how hard it was to be a parent. She even brought up the fact that I don't have kids, saying that since I have so much free time, I should do more to help. Our parents got involved, of course. My mom called me and said I should have just watched Ava for a few hours because family comes first. She pointed out all the times Lily had helped me in the past, like driving me to the airport or covering for me when I was late to a family event. When I argued that I had every right to say no, she sighed and said, "You'll understand when you have kids." I thought the drama might die down, but it didn't. Lily has barely spoken to me since then, and when she does, she's cold and distant. She didn't invite me to Ava's dance recital last week, which stung because I've always been there for those milestones. Our parents have also been giving me the cold shoulder, making passive-aggressive comments about how some people don't value family. I've talked to a few friends about this, and their opinions are mixed. Some think I was completely justified in setting boundaries, while others think I should have just sucked it up and helped Lily out, especially since it wasn't Ava's fault. I feel terrible because I love my niece, and I hate the idea of her thinking I don't want to spend time with her. But at the same time, I feel like Lily is taking advantage of me and not respecting my time. The situation came to a head last weekend. Our cousin got married, and the reception was the first time I saw Lily and my parents in person since the incident. It was awkward, to say the least. Lily barely acknowledged me, and my mom kept making snide comments about how some people only care about themselves. At one point, Lily pulled me aside and said she hoped I was happy with myself because Ava has been asking why I don't love her anymore. That broke my heart, but it also made me angry because I feel like Lily is using Ava to guilt me. Since then, I've been questioning everything. Maybe I should have just watched Ava that day to avoid all this drama. Maybe I was being selfish by prioritizing my plans over my niece. But another part of me feels like I shouldn't have to drop everything every time Lily needs a sitter. She and Mark can afford to hire someone, but Lily insists that family should step up. So, Reddit, am I the asshole for refusing to babysit my niece that day? Should I have just canceled my plans to help my sister, or was I right to set boundaries? AITA for refusing to let my roommate's girlfriend move into our apartment and causing tension between all of us. I, 26M, have been living with my roommate, Eric, 27M, for 3 years now. We first met in college, became good friends, and decided to split an apartment after graduation. Eric is a great guy overall, easygoing, responsible with bills, and generally clean. We've had our fair share of roommate conflicts, but nothing major until now. However, what's happening now has left me questioning everything, including whether we can even continue living together. For context, our apartment is a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom unit in a city where rent is sky high. We lucked out when we found this place because it's spacious and relatively affordable for the area. The lease is under both of our names, and we split everything 50-50, rent, utilities, groceries, etc. It's been a good arrangement, and for the most part, we've been able to keep a good balance of respecting each other's space while maintaining a friendly relationship. About a year ago, Eric started dating Jenna, 25F. I'll admit, I wasn't a huge fan of her from the start. She's one of those people who has a very dominating personality. She's loud, opinionated, and often makes everything about her. I've seen her be rude to waitstaff, talk over people in conversations, and brush off any criticism with a "that's just how I am" attitude. Still, she made Eric happy, and it wasn't my place to interfere in their relationship. So, I stayed polite and cordial whenever she was around, even though I found her exhausting. Over time, Jenna started spending more and more time at our apartment. It started with the occasional weekend sleepover, which was fine. Then it became 3 to 4 nights a week. Before I knew it, she was practically living with us, keeping clothes in Eric's closet, taking up space in the bathroom, and helping herself to our groceries without asking. She'd hang out in the living room for hours, watching TV, and inviting her friends over without giving me a heads up. It was starting to feel like I had an uninvited third roommate, but I let it slide because I didn't want to cause drama. About a month ago, Eric sat me down and dropped the bomb. Jenna wants to move in full-time. He said it would be temporary until she saves up enough to get her own place. According to him, her current living situation with her roommates is toxic, and she's been feeling really stressed. He assured me that she'd pay a share of the rent and utilities and that it wouldn't change much since she's already here so often. I immediately told him I wasn't comfortable with the idea. Our lease is for 2 people, not 3, and I don't want to live with Jenna. It's not just about her personality, though that's definitely part of it. I didn't sign up to share my space with someone else. I like having a roommate situation where it's just the 2 of us. Adding a third person, especially someone I don't get along with, would completely change the dynamic. Plus, Jenna has a habit of taking over whatever space she's in, and I could already see her treating the apartment like it's hers. Eric didn't take my refusal well. He argued that since I was fine with her being around so much already, it shouldn't make a difference if she officially moves in. He said it's just as much his apartment as it is mine, and he should have a say in who lives here. He also tried to guilt me, saying that as his friend, I should want to help him and Jenna out during a tough time. When I stood my ground, he got frustrated and accused me of being selfish and unreasonable. He said Jenna isn't that bad and that I'm overreacting. I pointed out that she's already been treating the apartment like her personal space without contributing anything, and I'm not willing to give up my peace and privacy just to make things easier for her. He stormed off, and things have been tense ever since. Now, Jenna's been actively trying to change my mind. She started being overly nice to me, which honestly feels fake. She's offering to cook meals, clean the apartment, and even offered to cover a bigger share of the rent if she moves in. But I know this isn't sustainable, and once she's officially here, it'll be impossible to set boundaries. Our mutual friends are divided on the issue. Some think I'm being stubborn and that I should compromise for the sake of our friendship. Others agree that I have every right to say no since I signed up to live with 1 roommate, not 2. My family thinks I'm completely justified, but they're also biased because they've heard me complain about Jenna before. Eric has been cold toward me since our argument, and he's clearly told Jenna about everything because she keeps making passive-aggressive comments like, "It must be nice to have the luxury of turning your back on people in need." I've started spending more time outside the apartment just to avoid them, but it's exhausting. I feel like a stranger in my own home. The tipping point came last week when I came home to find Jenna redecorating the living room. She had moved the furniture around and put up some new decorations she bought, all without asking me. When I confronted her, she laughed it off and said she was just making the place more cozy. I told Eric this was exactly why I didn't want her moving in, and he accused me of nitpicking and being territorial. I'm at my wit's end. I don't want to lose my friendship with Eric, but I also don't want to live in a situation that makes me miserable. I've considered looking for a new place, but moving in this city is expensive and stressful, and I shouldn't have to uproot my life because Eric and Jenna can't respect my boundaries. So, am I the asshole for refusing to let Jenna move in, even though it's caused so much tension? Should I just suck it up and agree to their plan? Or was I right to put my foot down? I'm genuinely torn and could use some outside perspective. AITA for refusing to help my brother after he neglected our family business for years and now wants my support? I, 32M, am part of a family that has owned and operated a small but successful bakery for 3 generations. My grandparents started it, my parents expanded it, and now it's fallen to me to keep it running. It's not a glamorous job, but I've always been passionate about baking and continuing the family legacy. My older brother, Adam, 36M, was also supposed to be part of the business, but things didn't go as planned, and now we're in a major conflict. Growing up, it was always understood that Adam and I would eventually take over the bakery. My parents treated us equally in this regard, teaching us the ropes from a young age. We both worked there as teenagers, learning everything from making dough to managing customers. Adam was always seen as the golden child because he was charming, outgoing, and seemed like a natural leader. Meanwhile, I was quieter and more focused on the technical side of baking. I didn't mind being in his shadow because I figured we'd complement each other as business partners. When Adam turned 18, he announced that he didn't want to be part of the bakery anymore. He said he had bigger ambitions and wanted to go into finance. My parents were supportive, though disappointed, and they made it clear that I'd inherit the bakery on my own if Adam chose a different path. I was fine with that because I loved the work and wanted to see the business thrive. Over the next decade, Adam completely distanced himself from the bakery. He rarely visited and never offered to help, even during our busiest seasons. Meanwhile, I poured everything into the business. I went to culinary school to improve my skills, worked long hours, and eventually took over full management when my parents retired. It wasn't easy, but the bakery continued to do well, and I was proud of what I'd accomplished. Fast forward to last year. Adam's career in finance didn't pan out the way he'd hoped. He bounced between jobs for a while and eventually decided to move back to our hometown with his wife and 2 kids. At first, I was happy to have him nearby again. I figured it would be nice to reconnect, even if we'd grown apart. But things took a turn when Adam started dropping hints that he wanted to get back to his roots and help out with the bakery. At first, I thought he was joking. Adam hadn't shown any interest in the bakery for nearly 15 years, and now he suddenly wanted to be involved? But he was serious. He claimed that he had fresh ideas and could help modernize the business to make it more profitable. I was skeptical, but I agreed to let him shadow me for a week to see how things worked. That week was a disaster. Adam treated the bakery like it was his playground, making wild suggestions without understanding the logistics or costs involved. He wanted to introduce complicated new menu items without considering how they'd fit into our workflow. He criticized our traditional methods, saying they were outdated and that we needed to keep up with the times. Worst of all, he didn't respect the employees, talking down to them like he was their boss. After the week ended, I told Adam that while I appreciated his enthusiasm, I didn't think it was a good idea for him to join the business. I explained that he lacked the necessary experience and that his approach clashed with the values that had kept the bakery successful for so long. I tried to be as diplomatic as possible, but he didn't take it well. Adam accused me of being selfish and insecure, claiming that I was afraid he'd outshine me. He argued that the bakery belonged to the family and that he had just as much right to it as I did. When I reminded him that he'd willingly walked away from the business years ago, he said that didn't matter because family is family. He even dragged our parents into the argument, expecting them to side with him. To my surprise, my parents were hesitant to take a firm stance. They acknowledged that I'd done all the work to keep the bakery running, But they also felt guilty about Adam's struggles and thought I should give him a chance. I was frustrated but stood my ground, telling them that Adam's involvement would do more harm than good. Since then, Adam has been bad-mouthing me to anyone who will listen. He's told mutual friends and extended family that I'm a control freak who refuses to share the business. He's painted himself as the victim, saying he just wants to contribute and that I'm shutting him out of spite. A few relatives have reached out to me, urging me to compromise for the sake of family harmony, but I don't think they understand the full picture. The final straw came last week when Adam showed up at the bakery unannounced and started talking to customers like he was part of the business. I pulled him aside and told him he needed to leave, and he accused me of being heartless and letting my ego ruin our relationship. Now, my parents are pressuring me to find a way to include Adam, saying that family businesses are supposed to bring people together, not tear them apart. I feel torn. On one hand, I don't want to alienate my brother or cause a permanent rift in the family. But on the other hand, I've worked too hard to let someone waltz in and disrupt everything I've built. I also don't trust Adam's motives. Part of me wonders if he's more interested in the financial stability of the bakery than in actually contributing to its success. So, Reddit, am I the asshole for refusing to let my brother join the family business after he neglected it for years? Should I be more open to his ideas? Or am I right to protect what I've worked so hard to maintain? AITA for refusing to let my friend borrow my car after he ruined his own? I, 28M, have a close-knit friend group of 5 people, and we've all known each other since high school. Among us is my friend Danny, 29M, who has always been known as the wild one. Danny is fun to be around, always has the best stories, and can make any gathering memorable. But there's also the other side of him. He's reckless, irresponsible, and has a bad habit of ignoring consequences. One of the most obvious ways this manifests is with his car, or rather, the series of cars he's had over the years. Danny is notorious for treating his vehicles like disposable toys. He doesn't keep up with maintenance, he drives recklessly, and he's racked up more tickets than anyone I know. In the last 6 years, Danny has gone through 3 different cars. Each one met its end because of his carelessness. He totaled his first car in an accident, his fault. His second car broke down after he ignored several warning lights for months. And his third car recently ended up in a ditch after he decided it was a good idea to race another driver on a rainy night. The ditch incident happened about 2 weeks ago. Luckily, Danny wasn't hurt, but his car was completely wrecked. He doesn't have the money to replace it right now, and his insurance won't cover much because he'd opted for the bare minimum coverage to save money. After the crash, he started asking our friend group if he could borrow one of our cars until he figures out a permanent solution. Everyone declined, citing various reasons, busy schedules, not wanting to risk their vehicles, etc. When he got to me, I told him no as well, but he didn't take it well. To give some context, I own a 2018 Honda Accord that I've taken very good care of. It's my first big purchase as an adult, and I'm proud of how I've maintained it. I rely on my car daily for work, errands, and everything else, so I can't afford for anything to happen to it. When Danny asked me to borrow it, I was polite but firm in saying no. I explained that I didn't feel comfortable loaning my car to anyone, especially considering his track record with vehicles. He laughed it off at first, saying he's learned his lesson and just needs a little help to get back on his feet. But when I didn't budge, he got defensive and accused me of being selfish. Danny argued that as his friend, I should trust him and be willing to help him in a time of need. He brought up how he's always there for me when I need a favor, which isn't entirely true. While Danny has helped me out a few times, it's always been minor things like picking me up from the airport or helping me move. Nothing close to the level of trust involved in lending someone a car. I pointed out that this wasn't about friendship. It was about the fact that I can't risk my car being damaged or totaled. He rolled his eyes and said I was overreacting and that he'd be super careful this time. I stood my ground, and Danny eventually left, but it didn't end there. Over the next few days, he kept bringing it up in our group chat, making passive-aggressive comments like, "Must be nice to have friends who actually care about you." He even tried to guilt me by saying how much stress he's under without a car and how I'm just making his life harder. One of our mutual friends privately told me she thinks I should just let him borrow it for a couple of days to keep the peace, but I don't think that's fair. To make matters worse, Danny has started twisting the story to make it sound like I'm refusing to help him out of spite. He's been telling people in our broader friend circle that I'm stingy and that I'm letting him suffer even though I could easily help him. I've had a few people reach out, saying things like, "Come on, man, it's just a car," which only makes me more frustrated. It's not just a car to me. It's my transportation, my responsibility, and something I've worked hard to maintain. What really pushed me over the edge was when Danny showed up at my place unannounced last weekend. He tried to sweet-talk me into changing my mind, saying he'd only use the car for essential errands and would return it in perfect condition. I told him again that my answer was no and that he needed to stop pushing the issue. He got angry and said I was being a bad friend, then stormed off. Now the whole situation has created a rift in our friend group. Some people are on my side, saying Danny is being unreasonable and that I have every right to refuse. Others think I'm being too harsh and should be willing to compromise. Even my parents, who heard about the situation from a family friend, suggested I should consider lending him the car with conditions to avoid damaging the friendship. But I can't shake the feeling that if I give in, I'll just be enabling his irresponsibility. I also can't ignore Danny's history. He's proven time and time again that he doesn't take care of his cars, and I have no reason to believe mine would be any different. What if he gets into another accident? What if he racks up tickets or damages the car in some other way? Even if he promises to cover any costs, I'd still have to deal with the hassle of repairs, insurance claims, and potentially being without a car for weeks. It's just not worth the risk to me. So now I'm left wondering if I'm in the wrong. I don't want to be the kind of person who abandons a friend in need, but I also feel like Danny brought this on himself with his reckless behavior. I've tried to offer other solutions, like helping him figure out public transportation options or suggesting he look into renting a cheap car temporarily, but he dismissed those ideas as unrealistic. Reddit: am I the asshole for refusing to let Danny borrow my car, even though it's caused so much drama in our friend group? Should I be more understanding and give him a chance? Or was I right to put my foot down? I feel like I'm stuck between protecting myself and preserving a friendship, and I don't know what to do. AITA for kicking my roommate out after he brought his pets into my apartment without permission. I, 26F, live in a 2-bedroom apartment that I rent. I've been here for almost 3 years and absolutely love the place. It's cozy, affordable relative to how expensive rent has gotten, and close to my job. For the first 2 years, I lived here alone, but last year, I decided to get a roommate to save money. That's how I ended up living with Greg, 28M, a friend of a friend. When Greg moved in, everything seemed fine. He's generally easygoing, works in IT, and has a decent sense of humor. We weren't super close, but we got along well enough. The terms of the rental agreement were straightforward. Greg would rent the second bedroom and split utilities with me. One important detail in the lease, and something I emphasized when we first talked about him moving in, is that pets are not allowed. It's a rule set by the landlord, and I've always followed it. I'm not a pet person myself, and I wasn't about to risk getting into trouble or having my rent increased because of someone else's pets. Greg was fine with this rule, or so I thought. When he moved in, he assured me he didn't have any pets and didn't plan to get any. For the first few months, everything was smooth sailing. Greg paid his share of the rent on time, cleaned up after himself, and generally kept to himself. I figured I'd lucked out with a decent roommate. Things started to change about 3 months ago. Greg mentioned in passing that his girlfriend, Emily, had to move out of her apartment due to a sudden rent hike. She ended up moving back in with her parents temporarily, but they weren't thrilled about her bringing her pets along. I didn't think much of it at the time, but in hindsight, I should have picked up on the red flag. Fast forward to about a month ago, I started noticing some strange things around the apartment. There was fur on the couch and rugs, even though neither of us owned pets. I'd occasionally hear scratching noises at night that I brushed off as coming from outside. But the kicker came when I opened the fridge one day and found an open can of cat food on the shelf. I immediately confronted Greg, and he sheepishly admitted that Emily's 2 cats, Smokey and Jasper, were staying in his room temporarily. I was livid. I reminded Greg of the no pets rule and told him he had to remove the cats immediately. He tried to justify it, saying that Emily's parents wouldn't let her keep them and that it was just for a little while until they figured something out. He promised to keep the cats confined to his room and clean up after them, but I wasn't having it. I told him he had 48 hours to find another solution, or I'd have to take it up with the landlord. Greg seemed apologetic at first and said he understood. I assumed he'd follow through, but 48 hours later, the cats were still there. When I confronted him again, he became defensive, saying I was being unreasonable and that he didn't have anywhere else to take them. He accused me of lacking compassion and said I was punishing him for trying to help his girlfriend. I didn't back down, though. I told Greg that if the cats weren't gone by the end of the day, I'd report the issue to the landlord. He called me a control freak and stormed out of the apartment. When he came back that night, he said he'd found a friend who could take the cats temporarily. I thought the issue was resolved, but I was wrong. Over the next couple of weeks, I started noticing more signs of pets. This time, it wasn't just fur. There were claw marks on the doorframe of Greg's bedroom and an unmistakable smell of urine in the hallway. I even caught a glimpse of one of the cats darting out of his room when I walked by. At this point, I realized Greg had lied to me and was still keeping the cats in the apartment. I confronted him again, and things got heated. Greg doubled down on his argument that I was being unfair and claimed that no one would ever know if I just let him keep the cats. I told him I wasn't willing to risk getting in trouble with the landlord or deal with the damage the cats were causing. I gave him an ultimatum. Either the cats went, or he did. Greg refused to budge, so I followed through. I contacted the landlord and explained the situation, including Greg's repeated disregard for the no pets rule. The landlord wasn't happy and gave me two options. Either Greg and the cats were out within a week, or we'd both face consequences, including potential eviction. I told Greg what the landlord said, and he accused me of being heartless and ruining his life. He said I'd forced him into an impossible situation and that I should have been more understanding. He packed up his things and the cats and moved out at the end of the week, but not without a lot of drama. He left behind a mess in his room, including clawed-up furniture and a stain on the carpet that I'm still trying to figure out how to clean. He also left me a nasty text, saying I was cold-hearted and that he hoped I'd never need help from a friend because I clearly don't know how to be one. Since then, Greg has been bad-mouthing me to our mutual friends, telling them I kicked him out over nothing and that I'm an impossible person to live with. A few people have taken his side, saying I should have been more accommodating and that it wasn't a big deal since the cat stayed in his room. Others agree with me, saying Greg was completely out of line and should have respected the no pets rule. I can't help but feel conflicted, though. On one hand, I know I did what I had to do to protect myself and my living situation. On the other hand, I hate that this whole situation ended so badly and that I've lost a roommate and possibly a friend over it. I also feel bad for the cats, who didn't ask to be part of this mess. So, Reddit, am I the asshole for kicking Greg out after he brought his pets into the apartment without my permission? Should I have handled the situation differently? Or was I right to put my foot down? AITA for ruining my family's annual game night tradition? Game nights have been a thing in my family since before I was even born. My parents started the tradition with their friends, and once my siblings and I were old enough, we joined in too. It's one of the few things my family genuinely bonds over. Every month, we gather in my parents' house, pick a board or card game, and compete like it's the Olympics. The winner gets bragging rights until the next game night, and it's all supposed to be in good fun. But over the years, the fun part has been debatable. For context, I'm the youngest of 3 siblings. My brother, David, 35, is the golden child. He's charismatic, successful, and competitive to the point of being unbearable. My sister, Mia, 33, is more laid-back but still has a sharp streak when it comes to winning. I'm Sarah, 28, and compared to them, I've always been the quiet one, more focused on keeping the peace than on winning. The thing about game night is that it brings out the worst in my family. My dad's competitive side kicks in, and my mom is usually stuck trying to calm everyone down when things get heated. David loves to gloat when he wins, and Mia has a habit of calling people out if she thinks they're cheating or not playing strategically. It's intense, but for some reason, we've all kept it going, probably because it's one of the few traditions we've managed to maintain as adults. Last month's game night was hosted at my parents' house, as usual. David brought his wife, Lisa, who's relatively new to the family. They got married a year ago, and while Lisa is sweet, she's also a bit of a pushover when it comes to David. She laughs at his jokes, even when they're at someone else's expense, and she rarely speaks up during arguments. Mia brought her boyfriend, Jake, who's a bit of a wild card and loves stirring the pot just for fun. The game of choice that night was Monopoly. Yes, I know, the game notorious for breaking friendships and families apart. I was already dreading it, but I figured if I kept my head down and played conservatively, I'd avoid most of the drama. Boy, was I wrong. From the start, David took control of the game. He was wheeling and dealing, making alliances, and undercutting offers just to gain an edge. Mia wasn't having it and called him out multiple times, accusing him of being manipulative. Jake chimed in, jokingly suggesting that David was probably like this in real life too, which only added fuel to the fire. Meanwhile, I was trying to play quietly, hoping to stay out of the crossfire. Things took a turn when David landed on one of my properties and refused to pay the rent. He claimed he didn't have enough cash and tried to barter his way out of it, offering me some useless properties in exchange. I stood my ground and said no, which seemed to surprise him. David isn't used to being told no, especially by me. He started getting loud, saying I was being unreasonable and that I should learn to negotiate better. Mia jumped in, telling him to back off, which escalated the argument even further. At this point, Lisa tried to defuse the situation by suggesting we take a break. But David wasn't having it. He accused me of ruining the game and being petty because I wouldn't make a deal with him. I finally snapped and told him that he always takes game night too seriously and that his constant need to win makes it miserable for everyone else. The room went silent. David looked genuinely shocked, and I think that's because I've never called him out like that before. My mom tried to smooth things over, saying it was just a game and we shouldn't let it get personal. But I wasn't done. I told everyone that game night has stopped being fun because of the toxic atmosphere. And I was tired of pretending like it was some wholesome family tradition when in reality, it's just an excuse for everyone to argue and belittle each other. Mia backed me up, saying she felt the same way for years, but didn't want to be the one to bring it up. Jake, of course, thought the whole thing was hilarious and kept making sarcastic comments, which didn't help. David, on the other hand, got defensive and said that if we couldn't handle a little healthy competition, then maybe we shouldn't participate. He and Lisa ended up leaving early, and the rest of us sat in awkward silence for a while before my mom suggested we call it a night. Since then, things have been tense. David hasn't spoken to me, and Lisa sent me a passive-aggressive text about how I embarrassed her husband in front of the family. My parents are upset that I ruined game night, and my dad even suggested I apologize to keep the peace. Mia, on the other hand, thinks I did the right thing, and she's even considering skipping future game nights altogether. I'm torn. On one hand, I don't regret standing up for myself and calling out the toxic behavior. On the other hand, I hate that I've created this rift in the family. Part of me wonders if I should have just let it go and avoided the drama altogether. But then I think about how miserable I've been during game nights and how it's only gotten worse over the years. So, am I the asshole for ruining game night and calling out my brother's behavior? Or was it about time someone said something? AITA for refusing to let my friend move back in after she turned my apartment into her personal storage unit. I live in a 2-bedroom apartment in a city where rent is ridiculously high. I'm 29F and work in marketing. So while I do okay financially, I don't exactly have piles of disposable income lying around. My apartment is pretty modest, but I love it. I've lived here for 4 years, and until recently, I shared it with my best friend of over a decade, Hannah, 30F. Hannah and I have been close since high school. We've been through everything together, breakups, job changes, family drama, you name it. So when she needed a place to stay after breaking up with her long-term boyfriend 2 years ago, I didn't hesitate to offer her my spare room. She moved in, and for a while everything was great. We got along well, split the bills evenly, and even enjoyed some movie nights or cooking together when we both had the time. About 8 months ago, Hannah got an amazing job opportunity in another state. It was her dream job, and I was thrilled for her. She gave me about a month's notice and promised to help me find a new roommate to replace her. However, about 2 weeks before she was supposed to move, she asked if she could leave some of her stuff in my apartment, just for a little while, until she got settled in her new place. She explained that she wasn't sure how much storage space she'd have at her new apartment and didn't want to haul everything across state lines only to bring it back if it didn't fit. She said she'd only leave a few things in my apartment and would come back to get them within a couple of months. I wasn't thrilled about it, but I agreed because, well, she's my best friend and I trusted her. I figured it was the least I could do to help her transition to her new life. I didn't charge her anything for storing her stuff, and I didn't put a time limit on it because I didn't think it would be an issue. The day she moved out, I realized I'd made a huge mistake. When I said she could leave a few things, I was picturing a couple of boxes. Instead, she left behind half of her furniture, several suitcases, multiple storage bins, and random items like a bike, a standing mirror, and a huge box of winter coats. My spare room was so full that I could barely walk through it. I was annoyed but didn't say anything because I knew she was stressed, and I didn't want to add to her plate. Fast forward 2 months. I hadn't heard anything from Hannah about coming to pick up her stuff, so I texted her to ask what her plan was. She apologized and said she was still figuring things out with her new apartment, but promised to come back soon. I let it go, thinking she just needed a little more time. Another month went by, and the spare room was still packed with her stuff. At this point, I was starting to get frustrated. I couldn't use the room for anything, and it felt like I was living in a storage unit instead of my home. I brought it up again, and she assured me she was working on it, but didn't give me a specific timeline. Then things got worse. I found a potential roommate who was ready to move in and help with the rent, but they backed out when they saw the state of the spare room. I ended up losing out on several $100s of rent because of it. I told Hannah about this, and she said she felt terrible but still didn't make any concrete plans to come get her stuff. She kept saying she was so busy with work and her new life, and every time I brought it up, she'd deflect or make excuses. By month 5, I was at my wit's end. I told Hannah that she needed to come get her stuff, or I'd have no choice but to start charging her for storage. She blew up at me, accusing me of being ungrateful and heartless. She reminded me of all the times she'd been there for me in the past, and said she couldn't believe I was putting money over friendship. I tried to stay calm and explained that I wasn't trying to be unreasonable, but she refused to listen and hung up on me. After that, we didn't talk for a while. I decided to give her one last chance and sent her a message saying she had until the end of the month to get her stuff, or I'd have to start getting rid of it. She didn't respond. The end of the month came and went, and her stuff was still there. I finally rented a storage unit, packed up all her belongings, and moved them there. I sent her the key and the address and told her she could pick it up whenever she wanted. When Hannah found out, she went ballistic. She accused me of violating her trust and told me I had no right to touch her things. She said I was selfish and that I only cared about myself. She even told some of our mutual friends, and now a few of them are saying I overreacted and should have been more patient. Others are on my side, saying she was taking advantage of me and that I had every right to reclaim my space. The situation escalated further when Hannah's lease fell through, and she asked if she could move back into my apartment temporarily while she figured things out. I told her no. I explained that after everything that happened, I didn't feel comfortable living with her again. She called me petty and said I was punishing her for something that wasn't a big deal. She's since been couch surfing and still hasn't picked up her stuff from the storage unit. Now I'm second-guessing myself. Did I handle this wrong? Should I have been more understanding and let her move back in? Part of me feels guilty because I know she's struggling, but another part of me feels like she brought this on herself by refusing to take responsibility for her actions. So, Reddit, am I the asshole for refusing to let my friend move back in after she turned my apartment into her personal storage unit? Should I have handled the situation differently, or was I right to set boundaries and stand my ground? AITA for cutting my sister out of my life after she ruined my wedding? I, 30F, recently got married to the love of my life, Matt, 32M. We had been together for 6 years before tying the knot, and our wedding was something we had been planning for over a year. We kept it fairly small, inviting close family and friends, and the venue was beautiful, an old barn with fairy lights and a rustic vibe that fit perfectly with our style. Now, for some background, I have a younger sister, Emma, 26F. Growing up, we were close, but as we got older, things started to change. Emma always had a tendency to make everything about her. She was the center of attention at every family gathering, and if she wasn't, she'd find a way to make a scene. I'll admit, I've always been the calm one in the family. I like to keep things low-key and don't thrive in chaos. Emma, on the other hand, thrives on drama. Our parents always encouraged me to be patient with her, to be understanding of her quirks. But over the years, I've just gotten tired of walking on eggshells around her. This didn't change when we started planning our wedding. I asked Emma to be my maid of honor, mostly because I felt obligated to. I knew she'd probably make some sort of drama out of it if I didn't, and truthfully, I wanted her to feel included, despite everything. But the second I asked her, things started to go downhill. It all began with the dress. I gave Emma some flexibility with the bridesmaid dress, as I wanted everyone to feel comfortable, but I did tell her I had some preferences about the color and style. The first fitting was fine, but after that, she started complaining. She didn't like the fabric. She didn't like the cut. She didn't like the way it made her look. Every time we spoke about the wedding after that, she'd find something else to criticize. Then it started to get worse. A few weeks before the wedding, Emma called me in tears. Apparently, she was upset because I hadn't made the wedding all about her. She felt like my wedding was too perfect and that I had stolen her spotlight by not giving her a chance to shine. I was honestly confused. I had never asked for anything dramatic. I just wanted a beautiful, intimate ceremony, and the idea of having Emma as my maid of honor was supposed to make her feel special. But she was convinced I was doing everything wrong. She didn't stop there. A few days before the wedding, she messaged me with a list of requests, which included changing parts of the ceremony to accommodate her, having a speech at the reception, and being the one to organize certain aspects of the day. She even suggested that I change the color of the flowers because she didn't like them. At that point, I felt like she wasn't supporting me at all. It felt like she was just trying to make the day about her. The last straw was the day of the wedding. The morning went smoothly, until Emma showed up at the venue, dressed in a completely different outfit than the bridesmaid dress we had all agreed on. She claimed that it was too uncomfortable and that this dress looked better on her. I was stunned. I asked her to change, but she refused, saying that it was her day too. I tried to remain calm, but I could feel the tension rising. I knew this wasn't about the dress anymore. It was about control. I confronted her privately, and things got heated. I told her that her behavior was selfish and that she was ruining my special day. She started crying and accused me of being a bridezilla, which absolutely shocked me. I've never been one to make a scene or demand things. All I wanted was for the day to be about Matt and me, not drama. I told her that I couldn't have her in the wedding if she wasn't going to respect my wishes. She stormed off, and I thought maybe the situation would calm down, but it didn't. By the time the ceremony started, Emma had left the venue entirely, and I had to walk down the aisle without my maid of honor. The aftermath of the wedding has been just as bad. Emma sent me a long text saying that she felt betrayed and that I was a terrible sister for not supporting her. She told me that I'd ruined our relationship over something so trivial and that I would regret it. Our parents called me, saying that I was being too harsh on Emma and that I should try to make amends. They said I should have been more understanding of her feelings and that family is supposed to come first. But I just can't bring myself to apologize. I feel like I've tried so many times to be patient with her, to support her, to understand her, and she always crosses a line. I've tried to explain to my family that this isn't about one incident. It's the culmination of years of behavior that I can't tolerate anymore. I've already been through so much in my life, and I wanted my wedding day to be peaceful and joyous, but Emma took that away from me. I'm emotionally exhausted, and I honestly feel like I'm better off without her in my life at this point. I've thought about it a lot, and I've come to the conclusion that cutting her out might be the only way to protect my mental health. But at the same time, I wonder if I'm being too harsh. Should I have tried harder to make peace? Was I too focused on having a perfect day? Maybe I overreacted. I'm genuinely torn here. AITA for cutting my sister out of my life after everything that happened at my wedding? Or am I just being a brat? AITA for not allowing my sister to bring her baby to my wedding, even though she's the only one without a plus one? I, 28F, recently got married to my now husband, Nick, 30M, after being together for 5 years. We planned a small, intimate wedding with about 60 guests at a beautiful vineyard. We wanted it to be a day focused on us and our closest family and friends, and we were both excited to celebrate with people we truly care about. We put a lot of thought into every detail, and I wanted it to be a fun day, not bogged down by any potential drama. But somehow, I still ended up in the middle of a huge family conflict that I honestly didn't expect. For some background, I have two siblings, a brother, David, 26M, and a sister, Olivia, 31F. Olivia has always been a bit extra. She's loud, dramatic, and has a way of making everything about her. We've always had a complicated relationship, but I love her and want to include her in my life. The problem is, she's also been a bit difficult to deal with when it comes to family events. And I knew I had to set some boundaries for my wedding if I wanted to keep the peace and focus on what was important to me. Olivia has a 9-month-old daughter, Lily. I love my niece to pieces, and I have nothing against babies in general. However, I knew from the beginning that I didn't want children at my wedding. The venue we picked was beautiful, but it wasn't particularly child-friendly. It was an outdoor vineyard with limited space, and there wasn't much for a baby to do. Plus, the ceremony was scheduled for late afternoon, and I didn't want any interruptions or distractions. I wanted my wedding to be an adult event, with people who could engage in adult conversations and enjoy the day without worrying about a crying baby or a toddler running around. I talked with Nick about it early on, and we both agreed that our guest list would be strictly for adults. We both come from large families, and if we allowed kids, we knew it would drastically change the vibe of the event and increase the guest count by a lot. We didn't want to hurt anyone's feelings, but we decided that children wouldn't be invited. I sent out the invitations a few months before the wedding. Everyone was given the heads up about our no children policy, and we were clear that we hoped people would be able to find childcare for the day. Most of our family and friends were understanding. David, my brother, has 2 young kids, but he was able to find a sitter for both of them without issue. The rest of our friends and family didn't seem to have any problems finding alternatives for their children either. Everything was going smoothly until Olivia reached out to me a couple of weeks before the wedding. She told me she didn't feel comfortable leaving Lily with a babysitter because she had never been away from her for that long. I totally understood her anxiety, especially since Lily was still quite young and Olivia is a hands-on mom. However, Olivia asked if she could bring Lily to the wedding, even though I had already made it clear that the event was for adults only. I responded with a polite but firm no because, as I said, we had decided as a couple that our wedding would be child-free. Olivia didn't take this well. She texted me saying that I was being unreasonable and that it wasn't fair to make her choose between coming to my wedding and being with her daughter. She told me that if I really cared about her, I'd make an exception and let her bring Lily. I explained again that it wasn't about her or Lily specifically, but about the atmosphere we wanted to create. I told her I didn't want the wedding to be disrupted by a crying baby or other children running around, especially since there would be plenty of adult guests in attendance. I also reiterated that other family members had figured out childcare and that I hoped she could do the same. Olivia wasn't happy, but I thought she had accepted it. At least, that's what I assumed until the week of the wedding when she texted me again. This time, she told me she was planning to bring Lily anyway, whether I liked it or not, because she didn't want to miss my wedding and she couldn't find anyone to watch her daughter. I was really taken aback by this, but I responded calmly, saying that if she brought Lily, she would not be allowed to attend the ceremony or reception because it would go against our wishes and disrupt the event. I let her know that if she chose to bring her baby, I wouldn't be able to include her in the rest of the day. Olivia was furious and accused me of being a selfish bridezilla. She told me I was putting my need for a perfect wedding above my family, and that if I truly loved her, I would understand how important it was for her to be there for me while still taking care of her child. She even said that I was shunning her as a mother and making her feel like she wasn't welcome in my life. My heart broke a little reading that, but I stood my ground because, at the end of the day, I knew it was my wedding, and I didn't want to compromise my vision for the day. The wedding day arrived, and Olivia didn't show up. She texted me a few hours before the ceremony, saying she couldn't come without Lily and that she hoped I understood. Honestly, I was devastated. I didn't want her to feel like she wasn't welcome, but I couldn't back down on my decision. I was heartbroken that she chose to prioritize her disagreement with me over being there for me on such an important day. After the wedding, I received messages from some of our extended family, including our parents, telling me I was wrong for not allowing Olivia to bring Lily. They said I was being too rigid and should have made an exception for family. Olivia also texted me a couple of days later, telling me I'd ruined our relationship and that she didn't know if she could ever forgive me for making her feel so excluded. She said that no wedding was worth losing family over, and I was being petty for not letting her bring her child. I've been thinking a lot about it since then, and I'm torn. I understand Olivia's frustration, but I also feel like I was within my rights to enforce the rules I set for my wedding. I love her, and I would have loved for her to be there, but I feel like I couldn't allow one person to disregard my wishes when I had set clear boundaries with everyone else. At the same time, I can't help but feel guilty for possibly losing my sister over a decision that was supposed to be about having a celebration with my closest loved ones. AITA for not allowing my sister to bring her baby to my wedding, even though she's the only one without a plus one? Or did I make a mistake by not accommodating her? AITA for refusing to take in my brother and his family after they took advantage of me. I, 34F, and the youngest of 3 siblings. My eldest brother, Liam, 40M, has always been a bit of a free spirit, while my middle brother, Kevin, 38M, has always been the golden child in the family. Our parents, while loving, have always shown an obvious preference for Kevin, and this favoritism has led to a lot of tension between us over the years. About 6 years ago, I inherited a house from my maternal grandmother. It's a modest 3-bedroom home in a quiet neighborhood, but I absolutely love it. The house holds sentimental value for me because my grandmother and I were very close. She left it to me specifically because I was the only one in the family who consistently visited and helped her in her later years. My brothers were too busy with their lives to care. When I inherited the house, Kevin and Liam were both very supportive. At least, that's how it seemed at the time. Kevin even joked that I should turn one of the bedrooms into a guest suite for him. I laughed it off because I didn't think he was serious. Spoiler alert, he was. Fast forward to 2 years ago. Kevin and his wife, Sarah, had a baby and decided to buy a larger house. They put their current home on the market and planned to stay with my parents during the transition. Unfortunately for them, their house sold much faster than they expected, and their new home wasn't ready yet. Kevin called me, asking if he, Sarah, and their newborn could stay with me for a few weeks. He assured me it wouldn't be longer than a month. I hesitated because I value my privacy, but he guilt-tripped me by saying it was just family and that he'd always been there for me. Against my better judgment, I agreed. I cleared out one of the bedrooms for them and even set up a makeshift nursery for the baby. At first, things were fine. Sarah was polite, Kevin was helpful around the house, and the baby was adorable. But after the first month, the cracks started to show. They kept extending their stay, always with some excuse about construction delays or issues with the new house. Their few weeks turned into 6 months. During that time, my home became unrecognizable. Kevin and Sarah treated the place like it was theirs. They rearranged my furniture without asking, painted one of the bedrooms without my permission, and even let their dog, who I didn't know they were bringing, ruin my backyard. They stopped contributing to household expenses after the 2nd month, and any time I brought it up, Kevin would brush me off, saying, "We'll make it up to you once we're settled in the new house." The final straw came when I found out they were giving out my address to delivery services for their online shopping. Packages were piling up on my porch, and I was the one stuck dealing with them because they were rarely home during the day. It felt like they were treating me like a free Airbnb and a personal assistant. I finally confronted Kevin and told him they needed to leave. He acted shocked and accused me of being ungrateful. He said, "We're family. How can you kick us out when we have nowhere else to go?" Sarah started crying, and I felt like the bad guy. But I held my ground and gave them a 2-week deadline to find somewhere else to stay. They left angrily and moved in with Sarah's parents until their new house was ready. Our relationship hasn't been the same since. Now, on to the current situation. Liam recently lost his job, and his landlord raised the rent on his apartment. He, his girlfriend, and her 2 kids are now struggling to make ends meet. Liam called me last month, asking if they could stay with me for a little while until they get back on their feet. He promised they'd pay rent and help out around the house. I immediately felt a sense of déjà vu and told him no. I explained that after what happened with Kevin, I wasn't comfortable having anyone else live with me. Liam didn't take it well. He accused me of punishing him for Kevin's actions and said I was being selfish by not helping family in their time of need. He pointed out that I have plenty of space and that his situation is different because they're willing to pay rent. I still said no because I don't want to deal with the stress of having other people in my home again. Now, my parents are involved and they're pressuring me to take Liam in. They've always had a soft spot for him because he's the baby of the family, and they keep reminding me that family takes care of family. My mom even suggested that it's my duty as a homeowner to help out since I'm lucky enough to have a house of my own. When I pointed out that they have a house with more space than mine, they quickly shut that down, saying they're too old to deal with the chaos of kids in the house. I feel stuck. On one hand, I understand that Liam is in a tough spot, and I don't want to see him or his girlfriend and her kids struggle. On the other hand, I feel like my home is my sanctuary, and I don't want to risk another situation like the one I had with Kevin. I've worked hard to maintain my independence and peace, and I don't think it's fair for me to sacrifice that, especially after being taken advantage of in the past. Liam has since called me multiple times, trying to convince me to change my mind. He even had his girlfriend call me to plead their case. When I didn't budge, he lashed out, calling me a cold-hearted B****, and saying I was abandoning my family. My parents are also giving me the cold shoulder and have made passive-aggressive comments about how money has changed me. So, Reddit, am I the asshole for refusing to let my brother and his family move in with me, even though they're in a tough situation? Or am I justified in wanting to protect my space and peace of mind? AITA for refusing to let my best friend bring her boyfriend to my wedding after she disrespected my wishes? I, 27F, am getting married to my amazing fiancé, Ben, 29M, in a few months. We've been together for 3 years, and our wedding planning has been a long and somewhat stressful process. We've agreed on most things, and we've both been clear about our expectations for the day. Our guest list is small, about 80 people, and we wanted to keep it that way. We didn't want to invite plus ones unless they were in serious relationships or had been dating for a long time. Now, let me tell you about my best friend, Jamie, 28F. Jamie and I have been friends since high school. We've been through everything together: breakups, family drama, new jobs, and everything in between. She's one of the most important people in my life, and I've always considered her family. We've been through thick and thin, and I've always supported her, no matter what. That being said, we've had our share of disagreements, especially when it comes to certain boundaries. Jamie has been dating this guy, Tom, 30M, for about 6 months. They met through mutual friends, and from the start, Jamie has been all over the place about their relationship. One minute she's head over heels for him. The next she's telling me he's kind of annoying or needs to grow up. Their relationship is, to put it lightly, a roller coaster. They fight constantly, and while I've been supportive of her, I can't help but feel like she's not sure where she stands with him. They've had multiple breakups and reconciliations in the short time they've been together, and I've witnessed her vent to me about his behavior on numerous occasions. Ben and I were talking about the wedding guest list a few months ago when the subject of Jamie and her boyfriend came up. Jamie had casually mentioned to me that she'd like to bring Tom to the wedding, even though they hadn't been dating that long. I politely told her that we were keeping the guest list small and that unless someone had been in a committed relationship for a while, we were only inviting the couple, no plus ones. I explained that it wasn't about her or Tom personally, but that I wanted to be fair to everyone and keep the number of guests under control. Jamie seemed fine with this initially and said she understood. But then, a few weeks later, she told me that Tom had already booked a flight for the wedding and made plans to be there. She said it was really important to her that he come, and she didn't want to have to choose between him and my wedding. I was honestly confused. I told her that I had already explained the no plus one rule to her, and that we weren't making exceptions for anyone. I told her I hoped she could understand, and that if she really wanted to come, she could come alone. She didn't take this well. Jamie texted me saying that I was being unfair and that I was treating her like she wasn't important enough to have her boyfriend at my wedding. She said that Tom had been looking forward to the wedding, and that I was being ridiculous by making her choose between her friendship with me and her relationship with him. She also accused me of not supporting her and told me that she had always been there for me, and I should return the favor. I was taken aback by how quickly she turned things around, especially since I thought we had already discussed this. I tried to explain again, calmly, that this wasn't about her or Tom personally. I told her that if I made an exception for her, I would have to make exceptions for other people as well, and the guest list would get completely out of hand. I also reminded her that we'd already agreed on a small wedding, and Ben and I didn't want to have a ton of people there with random plus ones. I told her that I hoped she would understand, but she insisted that it was totally unfair and that everybody else gets to bring their significant other. Why not Tom? She even said that if Tom wasn't invited, she wasn't sure if she would even come, which made me feel terrible. I never expected her to say that. At this point, I felt like she was being a bit dramatic. She kept bringing up how long we've been friends and how much I've always supported her, making me feel like I was somehow betraying her by sticking to my original guest list. I tried to be patient and reminded her that this was my wedding day and that I didn't want to deal with a lot of stress around it. I told her I understood her feelings, but this was the decision we made, and I couldn't change it. She was still upset, but I thought we could move on and that she would respect my decision. A few days later, I found out that Jamie had started telling people in our friend group that I was being a bridezilla and that I was treating her unfairly. She made it sound like I was demanding that she come alone and was putting pressure on her to choose between me and her boyfriend. This really upset me because it felt like she was turning our mutual friends against me and making me look bad. I tried to talk to her again and explain how much her behavior was hurting me, but she just brushed it off, telling me I was being too sensitive and that she didn't understand why I couldn't just let it go. At this point, I was feeling really frustrated. I've been nothing but supportive of Jamie, but it felt like she was disrespecting my boundaries over something so minor. I didn't want to ruin our friendship, but I also didn't want to let her dictate the terms of my wedding. I ended up telling her that if she couldn't respect my wishes and stop making the situation about her, I would have to reconsider our relationship. I told her that I loved her, but I couldn't have her causing drama in the final stretch of wedding planning. Jamie was livid. She texted me that I was being completely selfish and that she couldn't believe I was prioritizing my wedding over our friendship. She told me I was losing the plot and that I would regret this when she wasn't around anymore. I try to stay calm, but honestly, I've reached my breaking point. I haven't spoken to her since, and the wedding is only a few weeks away. Our mutual friends are starting to ask about what happened, and I've had to explain the situation multiple times. Some of them agree with me and think Jamie should respect my wishes, while others feel like I've gone too far and should have just let her bring Tom. I'm really torn because I don't want to lose her as a friend, but at the same time, I feel like I'm being reasonable. AITA for refusing to let my best friend bring her boyfriend to my wedding after she disrespected my wishes? Or should I have made an exception for her? AITA for refusing to attend my best friend's wedding because she excluded my partner? I, 27F, have been best friends with Emily, 28F, for over 15 years. We've been through everything together, from childhood sleepovers to supporting each other through breakups, job losses, and family issues. She's one of the most important people in my life, and I truly consider her like a sister. We've always been close, and our friendship has always felt like a solid, unbreakable bond. However, when Emily got engaged last year, things started to feel off between us. Don't get me wrong, I was thrilled for her. I was excited about her wedding, and I couldn't wait to see her marry the love of her life, Jake 30M. But as the wedding planning progressed, something started to change in the way Emily treated me. It began when she asked me to be her maid of honor. Of course, I said yes. I was honored and excited to take on the role. But then, as the planning moved forward, things started to feel a little strange. Emily began giving me tasks that felt less about me being her maid of honor and more about her own control issues. She would tell me exactly what to wear to events, what I was supposed to say in speeches, and even dictate my behavior at certain points. I've always been the supportive friend, but this began to feel less like a celebration of her love and more like a full-on production that I was expected to be a part of on her terms. Fast forward a couple of months into the wedding planning, and I started hearing about the guest list. Emily had always made it clear that she wanted a small wedding, which I understood. She didn't want a huge event, and I respected that. But then, when I started seeing the guest list take shape, I was surprised. A lot of people who Emily and I both knew casually were on the list, while some of my closest friends and family weren't invited. At first, I didn't question it. I knew she had her reasons for wanting a smaller wedding, so I just assumed it was her preference. The issue really started to arise when I realized that Emily had left my partner, Max, 29M, off the guest list. I've been in a committed relationship with Max for 3 years. He's the person I live with, the person I rely on, and honestly, he's become such a huge part of my life that it felt strange for Emily to exclude him from her wedding. I decided to bring it up to her one day when we were chatting about wedding stuff. I told her that I noticed Max wasn't on the guest list, and I wanted to know if that was an oversight or if she had decided not to invite him. Emily responded with a shrug and said that she didn't think Max fit in with the vibe of the wedding. She told me it wasn't anything personal, but that the guest list was already tight and she was only inviting people she felt really close to. Now, let me explain a little more about Max and Emily. Max and Emily have met a few times over the years, and while they aren't best friends, they get along well. I wouldn't say they're close, but there's never been any tension or reason for Emily to feel like he wouldn't fit in with her group. When I asked her for more clarification on why she felt this way, she just kept repeating that it was a vibe thing and that she had to keep the guest list small. At first, I tried to let it go. I mean, I've been friends with Emily for so long, and I didn't want to make a scene. But as the wedding drew closer, I started feeling more and more upset. I couldn't shake the feeling that Emily was intentionally excluding Max. The more I thought about it, the more it didn't make sense. She'd invited some of her distant cousins and people she hadn't seen in years, but not my partner? Someone I live with? Someone who has been a big part of my life for years? It just felt wrong. I tried talking to her again, but this time I was more direct. I told her that I was feeling uncomfortable with the situation and that I felt like Max should be invited. I told her that it hurt me to think about going to her wedding without him, especially since he's such an important part of my life and I couldn't imagine attending without him by my side. Emily's reaction was, to put it lightly, not great. She told me that I was being dramatic and that I needed to stop making it about me. She told me she had a lot of people to invite and couldn't accommodate everyone. I tried to explain that I wasn't asking for a plus one, just for the sake of it. I wasn't asking her to invite someone she didn't know or didn't like. I was asking her to invite my partner, someone who had been by my side for years, and someone I wanted to attend her wedding with me. Emily got really defensive at this point. She told me that she didn't want to make her wedding awkward by having people who weren't close to her there. Even though I explained that Max and I had been together for years and that he was, in fact, very important to me. I felt like she wasn't even trying to understand where I was coming from. At this point, I felt like I was getting nowhere. I told Emily that if Max wasn't invited, then I wouldn't be attending the wedding. I know it sounds extreme, but it was the only way I could make my point clear. I felt like I was being forced to choose between her and my relationship, and I wasn't willing to do that. Emily's response was a mixture of anger and disbelief. She told me that I was being selfish and that I couldn't possibly be serious. She said I was throwing away our friendship over something so trivial. She even accused me of trying to control her wedding, which was hurtful because that was never my intention. I just wanted my partner to be there with me. Things got tense after that. We stopped talking as much, and I felt like she was deliberately distancing herself from me. I tried to apologize for the way I presented things, but she still didn't budge. She said if I couldn't accept her decision, then I wasn't really her friend. That really stung, and I started questioning whether I was being unreasonable. I understand that it's her wedding, and she's allowed to make decisions about her guest list. But at the same time, I couldn't help but feel like she was being unfair and inconsiderate of my feelings. The wedding is now a few weeks away, and we haven't spoken much since that conversation. I've been in a lot of pain over this, but I don't know what else to do. Max has supported me through all of this, and I tried to explain to him that this is not just about him being excluded from the wedding. It's about the fact that Emily is refusing to acknowledge how important he is to me. I feel torn. I don't want to lose Emily, but at the same time, I feel like I'm being asked to choose between her and my partner, and that's not something I'm willing to do. So, AITA for refusing to attend my best friend's wedding because she excluded my partner? Or am I overreacting and making too big a deal out of this? AITA for ruining my friend's business by calling her out on social media? I, 29F, have been best friends with Claire, 30F, since middle school. We've been through everything together, breakups, family issues, job struggles, you name it. Claire has always been ambitious and, about 3 years ago, started her own small business making handmade candles. She poured her heart into it, and I was so proud of her. I even helped her out at the beginning, offering free labor, helping with the website, and promoting her on social media. At first, the business seemed to be doing great. Claire had a knack for marketing, and her Instagram page blew up. She started getting tons of orders, collaborated with a few influencers, and even got her candles into some local boutique stores. I was genuinely thrilled for her. But as the business grew, I started noticing some things that rubbed me the wrong way. For one, Claire would constantly complain about how overwhelmed she was and how hard it was to keep up with orders. I offered to help, even suggesting that she hire someone part-time, but she refused, saying she didn't want to lose control over the quality of her products. Fair enough, but then I noticed that some of her candles were not great. She used to put so much effort into making them perfect, but as demand grew, it seemed like she started cutting corners. Some of the candles I bought had uneven wicks, weird scents, or arrived damaged. I didn't say anything at first because I figured she was just overwhelmed and would figure it out. Things started to escalate about a year ago when Claire launched a special edition line for the holidays. She hyped it up like crazy, and people were paying a premium for these candles. I bought a couple to support her, but when they arrived, I was shocked. They were poorly made, the labels were crooked, and one of them had leaked wax all over the packaging. I messaged Claire privately to let her know, thinking she'd want the feedback. Instead, she got defensive and accused me of trying to bring her down. I was stunned. I wasn't trying to criticize her. I just thought she'd want to know so she could fix it. After that, I noticed more and more complaints about her products popping up in her Instagram comments. People were saying their candles arrived broken, didn't smell like the description, or burned unevenly. Claire would either delete the comments or respond in a way that came across as dismissive. I tried talking to her about it again, but she brushed me off, saying, "Haters are gonna hate." Fast forward to a couple of months ago, Claire launched a subscription box service for her candles, where customers would pay up front for 3 months' worth of candles. It sounded like a great idea, but almost immediately people started complaining. Orders were late, candles were missing from boxes, and some subscribers didn't receive anything at all. I knew Claire was struggling to keep up, but instead of being transparent, she started blocking people who complained and even accused some of them of lying. At this point, I was starting to feel really uncomfortable. I knew Claire was stressed, but I also felt like she was taking advantage of her customers. Then one day, I got a DM from someone I didn't know. They'd seen me comment on one of Claire's posts and asked if I knew how to get in touch with her because they'd been trying to get a refund for weeks with no response. I checked her page and saw she'd blocked this person and several others who were asking about refunds. I couldn't stay silent anymore. I decided to post about my experience with Claire's business on my own social media. I didn't name her directly, but it was obvious who I was talking about to anyone who knew us. I explained how I'd supported her business from the beginning, how I'd noticed a decline in quality, and how she was now ignoring and blocking customers who had legitimate complaints. I also encourage people to be cautious about who they support online and to hold businesses accountable. The post blew up way more than I expected. People started sharing it, and soon enough, the local community was buzzing about it. Claire found out almost immediately and called me in tears, screaming that I'd ruined her reputation and destroyed her business. She said she'd already lost a ton of followers and was getting flooded with refund requests. I felt terrible, but I also felt like I'd done the right thing. Now our mutual friends are split. Some think I was right to call her out, saying she needed a wake-up call and that she shouldn't have been treating her customers that way. Others think I crossed a line and that I should have confronted her privately instead of airing her dirty laundry online. My parents even chimed in, saying I should have stayed out of it because it wasn't my business. Claire has since shut down her Instagram and put her shop on hiatus. She won't talk to me, and I honestly don't know if our friendship can recover from this. Part of me feels like I betrayed her, but another part of me feels like she brought this on herself by refusing to take responsibility for her actions. So, Reddit, am I the asshole for calling out my friend's business and essentially ruining it, or was I justified in holding her accountable for how she was treating her customers? AITA, for taking my sister-in-law's side in family drama, over my brother's inheritance? I, 31F, have been married to my husband, Derek, 34M, for almost 6 years. Derek has an older brother, Chris, 36M, who's always had a bit of a strained relationship with the family. Derek and Chris were close when they were younger, but things started to fall apart when they became adults. To make matters worse, Chris married my sister-in-law, Jenna, 33F, and the two of them had a pretty rocky start. However, over the years, they worked through their issues and seemed to settle into a relatively peaceful dynamic. A year ago, Derek and I found out that Chris and Jenna were going to inherit their parents' house. Chris and Derek's parents, while not super wealthy, had a few properties, and the house was the biggest asset. Their parents, Joan and Frank, were in their late 60s, and their health had been declining for a few years. We weren't super close to Joan and Frank, but Derek and Chris had grown up in that house, so it was a big deal. Now, Chris and Jenna didn't get along well with their parents. Chris, especially, had been at odds with them over the years due to his lifestyle choices. They were very traditional and had strong opinions about what he did with his life, and it caused some serious rifts in their relationship. When their parents passed away suddenly, it seemed like there was a lot of unresolved tension. Joan and Frank didn't have a will. Their estate was set to go to Chris and Derek equally, but there was no clear plan in place for the house. Chris and Jenna assumed they'd inherit it because they were living there at the time, but Derek felt that the house should be sold and the proceeds split between him and Chris. Derek didn't feel that Chris and Jenna should get the house because they'd made little effort to repair their relationship with their parents over the years, while Derek had kept in touch with them regularly. When we sat down as a family to discuss what should happen, things got heated. Derek was adamant that the house should be sold, and the money should be divided fairly. Chris and Jenna, on the other hand, argued that they should keep it because they were already living there, and it would be too disruptive to move. They also claimed that the house had a lot of sentimental value to them, since they had been living in it for years and had created memories with their kids there. Derek felt that it wasn't fair, given their lack of effort to reconcile with their parents, and that it should go to the person who had been involved in their lives and kept their relationship with them intact. At first, I didn't want to get involved. It was a family matter, and I didn't want to upset anyone, especially since Derek and Chris had always been close. But Derek started to ask me for my opinion, and I couldn't help but feel that Chris and Jenna were being selfish. Yes, they were living in the house, but they hadn't even made an effort to be there for their parents in their last years. Derek had visited them regularly, helping out with errands and spending time with them when they needed support. But Chris and Jenna had distanced themselves for years, and I couldn't understand why they felt entitled to the house when Derek had put in the effort to maintain a relationship with his parents. So, I started to side with Derek. I felt like it would be fairer if the house was sold and split between both brothers, especially since there was no will to make things clear. Chris and Jenna, however, became defensive and angry. They accused us of not respecting their bond with the house, saying that we were just trying to take away their home for financial gain. Jenna even started crying and said that Derek didn't care about family and was only thinking of money. That comment stuck with me, and I started to feel really uncomfortable with the way they were treating Derek, who had been nothing but supportive of them. Over the course of several heated conversations, the situation started to escalate. Chris and Jenna's behavior became more aggressive. They accused Derek of trying to manipulate them and claimed that I was only fueling his greed. At one point, they even accused me of trying to turn Derek against them, which I found absurd. I wasn't asking for anything, and I was just trying to stay out of it. But I couldn't help but feel that Chris and Jenna were trying to take advantage of the situation. After one particularly bad argument, Chris stopped speaking to Derek. This went on for months. There were no family gatherings, no communication, and the silence between them was deafening. It hurt Derek deeply, especially since he had always looked up to his brother growing up, but Chris was adamant that he wasn't going to speak to him unless Derek apologized for his stance on the house. I tried to talk to Jenna to see if I could mediate the situation, but she was just as stubborn as Chris. She kept telling me that Derek was being unreasonable and that they should be the ones to keep the house because of all the memories they'd made there. I reminded her that Derek had just as many memories with the house growing up, and that didn't mean he was entitled to it. She ignored everything I said, and it was clear that she wasn't going to listen. The whole situation started to get really toxic, and I was caught in the middle trying to balance my relationship with Derek and my relationship with Chris and Jenna. Finally, after months of tension, Derek made the decision to propose selling the house and splitting the money between him and Chris. He said it would be the only way to make sure everything was fair and it would prevent further conflict. I supported him, and we talked about how we would split the proceeds. But when we brought this to Chris and Jenna, they flat out refused. They said they weren't going to sell the house under any circumstances. At that point, I had had enough. I knew Derek was hurting, and I couldn't stand to see him suffer anymore. I decided to take matters into my own hands and called Jenna to tell her that if they didn't agree to sell, I was going to go public with what was happening. I didn't think it would escalate as quickly as it did, but within hours, our entire family was involved. Derek's parents were furious at Chris and Jenna for refusing to compromise, and the rest of the family started taking sides. Some agreed with Derek's approach to selling the house, while others sided with Chris and Jenna, arguing that the house should stay with them. In the end, the family was divided. Derek hasn't spoken to Chris in months, and I haven't been able to get through to Jenna. They both refuse to communicate with us, and I can't help but feel that I've made the situation worse. My family is telling me I should have let Derek handle it on his own and that I should have stayed out of it. They say I shouldn't have put my foot down and gotten involved, but I honestly felt like Derek was being unfairly treated. He was simply trying to protect his interests and get a fair share, but it felt like his brother and wife were taking advantage of the situation. Now, I'm left wondering if I was wrong to take Derek's side so strongly, and if I should have stayed out of the inheritance drama altogether. I still believe Derek was right, but I can't help but feel like I've created a rift that might never heal. So, Reddit, AITA for stepping in and taking Derek's side during this inheritance drama? Should I have just stayed out of it and let him handle it himself? AITA for refusing to let my sister-in-law stay with us after she's been rude to my wife. So here's the situation. I, 35M, have been married to my wife, Rachel, 33F, for almost 7 years. We've been through a lot together and are really happy. We don't have kids yet, but we've got a nice home, good jobs, and a pretty close-knit extended family. The issue here is with my sister-in-law, Claire, 29F. She's Rachel's younger sister. And to be honest, things between us have always been a bit strained. Claire has a history of being rude and dismissive, particularly to Rachel, but I've always tried to stay neutral and not get involved. I've never been close to Claire, but I've always tried to respect her as part of the family. I didn't want to add fuel to the fire by becoming a part of their drama. Now, Claire recently went through a tough breakup, and she reached out to Rachel asking if she could stay with us for a couple of weeks while she figures things out. We were initially hesitant, but decided to let her stay. I'll admit that we have a nice home with a guest room, and it didn't seem like the worst thing to do, especially since Rachel wanted to support her sister during a tough time. However, I have a big problem with Claire's attitude. The first day she moved in, she was already making passive-aggressive comments about how perfect our home was and how we must have so much money because we could afford to live in such a nice area. Rachel brushed it off at first, but I could see that it was starting to wear on her. Claire also started to make little digs about Rachel's choices in life. Things like how Rachel doesn't live for herself because she's not as career-driven as Claire, and how Rachel's not doing enough with her potential. Rachel tried to brush it off, but it was clear she was getting hurt by Claire's comments. As the days went on, Claire started to make herself more and more at home, by which I mean she started leaving her stuff everywhere, not cleaning up after herself, and making noise late into the night, even though Rachel and I both work early in the morning. I work from home a couple of days a week, so I was trying to be accommodating, but it was becoming difficult to focus with the constant noise and chaos Claire was causing. One morning, Rachel and I were sitting down for breakfast, and Claire came into the kitchen complaining about the smell of the coffee. "Why do you guys drink this stuff? It smells so strong. You should really think about switching to something lighter," she said. Rachel, trying to be polite, offered Claire a cup of coffee from our espresso machine, but Claire rejected it. She went on about how she preferred her fancy organic tea, which she had brought with her and was now taking up space in our kitchen. That wasn't the worst part, though. A few days later, Rachel was sitting at the kitchen table, trying to get some work done, and Claire walked in, talking loudly on the phone with a friend. It was like she didn't care that Rachel was working or that she needed some peace and quiet. At one point, Claire even went as far as saying, "I can't believe Rachel is still working on that project. It's taking her forever. I'd have been done by now." Rachel was visibly upset, but didn't say anything. I could tell she was trying to avoid conflict, but Claire just kept pushing her buttons. By this point, I was really frustrated. I tried to stay out of it, but I couldn't ignore it anymore. Rachel and I talked about it, and she confided in me that she felt like Claire was being passive-aggressive, rude, and selfish. Rachel said she didn't want to make a big deal out of it because Claire was going through a breakup and needed support, but I could tell it was really taking a toll on her mental health. I decided that something needed to change, so I sat down with Claire to talk about it. I tried to keep it calm and respectful, but I was very direct. I told her that while we were happy to let her stay with us, her behavior was becoming a problem. I mentioned the constant noise, the rude comments, and how she was making Rachel feel uncomfortable in our own home. I also mentioned that it was important for her to be respectful of our space and our routine. Claire immediately got defensive. She claimed that I was being unreasonable and that I was just taking Rachel's side. She told me I was being too sensitive and that I should lighten up. She also claimed that she was going through a hard time and didn't have the emotional energy to be perfectly polite. I tried to empathize with her and said I understood that she was going through a tough time, but that didn't mean she could treat Rachel and me like this. Things got heated, and Claire started to escalate the situation. She claimed that I didn't understand what she was going through and that I had no right to criticize her. I tried to explain that it wasn't about criticizing her, but about her behavior and how it was affecting Rachel and me. But Claire just wasn't having it. Rachel overheard the conversation and came into the room. She was upset, but I could tell she was also relieved that I was finally standing up to Claire. She asked Claire to respect our space and be more considerate, but Claire exploded. She accused Rachel of playing the victim and being melodramatic. She said that Rachel was just mad that her perfect little life was being disrupted and that she was being ungrateful. At this point, I was fed up. I told Claire that I didn't think it was working and that she needed to find another place to stay. I told her that if she couldn't respect the boundaries we had set, then it would be best for her to leave. Claire was furious. She stormed out of the room, saying she would never forgive me for throwing her out when she was at her lowest point. After she left, Rachel and I talked, and we both agreed that we had made the right call. It wasn't easy, and I know it hurt Rachel to have to ask her sister to leave, but we both felt like Claire was taking advantage of our kindness and disrespecting us. We haven't heard from Claire since, and I'm honestly not sure where we stand with her. Now, I'm feeling a bit conflicted. Part of me feels like we did the right thing by setting boundaries and standing up for ourselves. But another part of me wonders if I could have been more patient or handled it better. Maybe I was too harsh by telling her to leave right away. Maybe I should have let her stay a bit longer and try to work things out. Rachel's family has been split on the issue. Some agree with us and think Claire was being rude and inconsiderate. Others think we were too harsh and should have been more understanding. Rachel's mom has reached out a few times, asking if Claire is okay and whether we could have handled things differently. So Reddit, AITA for refusing to let Claire stay with us after everything that happened? Should I have been more patient with her? Or was it fair to ask her to leave when she was treating Rachel and me like that? AITA for refusing to give my friend a loan after she spent her savings on an expensive vacation? I, 29F, have a close friend, Emily, 30F, who I've known since high school. Over the years, we've had our ups and downs, but we've always remained friends. She's been a great support to me through some tough times, and I've tried to do the same for her. However, recently things have been a bit strained between us, and I'm starting to wonder if I did the right thing. Here's the situation. Emily came to me a few weeks ago asking for a loan of $5,000. She told me that she had been saving up for a vacation for a long time, but her plans didn't go as expected. Her car broke down, and she had to use most of her savings to pay for repairs. She said she didn't have enough to cover the remainder of her trip and was hoping I could lend her the money so she wouldn't have to cancel it. Now, I knew Emily had been planning this trip for a while, and I also knew that she had been saving for it. But here's the thing. She had been posting about the vacation on social media for months, showing off how expensive it was and how amazing it was going to be. She had been talking about how she was staying in a luxurious resort, eating at fancy restaurants, and doing all sorts of expensive activities. At the time, I thought it was just her being excited, but now it seemed like she was treating the trip as some sort of status symbol. I'll be honest, I felt uncomfortable with her asking me for money, especially since I knew that she had made some questionable financial decisions in the past. She had always been a bit reckless with money, spending on things that weren't necessities, and she often complained about not having enough to pay for things like rent or groceries. In the past, she'd even asked me to cover small expenses like dinners or drinks when she was short on cash. I didn't mind helping her out occasionally, but this was different. $5,000 was a significant amount, and I wasn't sure if I should be enabling her to continue this pattern of financial irresponsibility. At the time she asked for the loan, I was in a stable financial position. I had been saving for a down payment on a house, and I had worked hard to get to where I was. I didn't want to risk my savings by giving a large sum of money to someone who had a history of making poor financial choices. I also didn't feel comfortable with the idea that she would be spending money on a vacation while asking me for a loan. It just didn't sit right with me. I tried to explain my concerns to Emily. I told her that I didn't think it was a good idea for me to lend her that amount of money, especially considering her spending habits. I told her that I didn't want to enable her to make the same mistakes and that I was worried about the impact it could have on our friendship if things didn't go as planned. I also explained that I had my own financial goals and couldn't afford to risk my savings, especially for something that wasn't an emergency. Emily was hurt, and I could tell she didn't take my response well. She argued that she had been planning this trip for months and that it was something she really needed. She said it wasn't fair for me to judge her for wanting to enjoy a vacation, especially after everything she had been through in the past year. She mentioned how hard she had worked to save for the trip and how she had been looking forward to it for so long. She told me that if I were really her friend, I would help her out and that I should stop being so judgmental about her spending choices. I felt guilty for saying no, but I stuck to my decision. I told her that I couldn't help her with that amount of money, and I suggested she look for other ways to cover the cost, like taking out a small loan from a bank or asking other friends or family members for help. I also reminded her that if she couldn't afford the trip, maybe it was time to consider postponing it or scaling back her plans. The next few days were awkward. Emily stopped responding to my texts and didn't return my calls. I knew she was upset, but I also felt like I had made the right decision. She had a history of making poor financial decisions, and I didn't want to get caught in the middle of it. I also didn't want to put myself in a situation where I felt obligated to lend her money, especially when I wasn't sure she would be able to pay it back. A few days later, Emily reached out to me again, but this time it was different. She wasn't angry or upset, but she was still asking for the loan. She apologized for the way she had acted and said she understood my concerns. She explained that she was feeling a lot of pressure and just really wanted to go on this vacation. She said she was so close to being able to afford it, but just needed a little help. She told me that if I helped her now, she would pay me back as soon as possible, and that she would make sure not to ask for any more favors in the future. This time, I felt even more conflicted. I didn't want to lose our friendship over something like money, but I also didn't want to be put in a position where I felt like I was enabling her to keep making poor financial decisions. I thought about how I would feel if I did give her the loan and things went wrong. What if she didn't pay me back? What if she continued to make irresponsible decisions with her money? I didn't want to risk it. After a lot of thought, I decided to tell her again that I couldn't help her. I apologized for the way things had gone, but I reminded her that I had my own financial goals and I couldn't risk my savings for something that wasn't essential. I told her that I hoped she would understand and that I still cared about her, but I just couldn't offer her the loan. Since then, things have been really tense between us. She hasn't spoken to me much, and when she does, it's always short and cold. I've reached out a few times to try and repair the friendship, but she hasn't been receptive. I feel like I've lost a friend, and it's making me second-guess my decision. Was I wrong to refuse to give her the loan? Should I have been more supportive, or did I make the right call by not enabling her to keep making poor financial choices? I'm just not sure where I stand anymore, and I really miss the friendship we had.